I can't believe it. USC, Notre Dame, almost 100 years old. It might be coming to a sudden death.
You are Locked On USC, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Holken, and thanks for making Locked On USC for the Locked On Network your first listen every day. This is a special crossover edition. We've got Tyler Wojciak from Locked On Fighting Irish with us. So whether you're watching this show on YouTube, wherever you want to download this podcast, it's always free. You know how much I always appreciate your support. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Tyler, welcome to the show. Thanks for doing this. You are my respected, hated enemy. USC has two rivals, UCLA, Notre Dame. We respect Notre Dame. We don't respect UCLA. So welcome. Thanks for doing this, man.
No problem. Happy to be here despite the unfortunate circumstances.
Right? It's kind of crazy that we're even talking about USC and Notre Dame not playing past this season. So it's kind of in limbo right now. And the news came out, it's kind of been out there since last year, the Big Ten, called the Big Ten Media Day, where Lincoln Riley kind of floated the trial balloon. They were asking him about, do you see these marquee out-of-conference games continuing the way everything is structured? And he's kind of like, well, no. However, if we get 4 automatic berths in the big conference, then yes, these types of games can continue. But right now, Pat Forty, Sports Illustrated, put it out there. Notre Dame wants to see, a long-term contract extension. USC is willing to do a 1-year extension at the moment until they know for sure what's going on. What are Notre Dame fans saying about this? Because USC fans want to continue, but they want it under their terms, not Notre Dame terms.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a mixed bag. Obviously, everyone is upset at the idea that this could be going away. And you've got your section of Notre Dame fans who just want to make fun of USC and say they're ducking the smoke and all of that. But I think that there is a majority of people who are just really upset that this is even a possibility. Because speaking as someone who has been a Notre Dame fan their entire life, the Notre Dame USC game has always meant so much, even during the years when one team is down. And unfortunately, that's kind of been the story of this rivalry throughout my life, where, when USC was at their peak during the Pete Carroll era, Notre Dame was down. So they had that one great game with the Bush push in 2005. But other than that, it was pretty one-sided. When I was a kid, I didn't think that Notre Dame would ever beat USC. It didn't seem possible up until 2010. And then I would say once Notre Dame started to turn things around during the Brian Kelly era, that coincided with USC going a bit downhill. And even though these teams haven't always been on the same playing field in terms of their status in the sport that particular year, this rivalry always means so much. Just look at last year, that game in the Coliseum. Notre Dame was 1 game away from clinching their spot in the college football playoff. USC didn't have that much to play for. That was still a great game, and I was there in the crowd. USC fans cared a lot about the outcome in that game because they had a chance to spoil their rival season. And I just think that if that were to go away, that would be, frankly, a tragedy for Notre Dame and USC fans, but also college football as a whole.
Yeah, see, you remember the years of Pete Carroll. I lived through a 13-year winless streak, so trust me, I understand where you're coming from with these ebbs and flows and the roller coaster ride. You probably have to go back to the 70s when both teams were kind of at their halcyon days and challenging each other. I mean, John McKay, Eric Parsegian, they've got, 5-6 national champions between them within a 13-year period. So every other year was USC or Notre Dame winning the national championship. That's how special this is for the game of college football. And we're watching the way the game is evolving, but at the same time, we're kind of watching the game die at the same time. And I think USC versus Notre Dame is one of those last bastions of tradition that college football should hold on to. And I'm just wondering, how much does that change if that game goes away? Because I was on the Big Ten Squad show the other day, and I was shocked. Most of the people are in your age range, but it was unanimous. They want to see this series continue. So for me, this is the hill I'm dying on. And I'm kind of looking at USC like, what's the deal? Just get in line. Let's make this happen. But
I think one of the things that makes this rivalry great is the history. Like, Notre Dame is one of the historically great programs in college football. They're right at the top with the most wins of all time, and USC is not that far behind them. So you have these two historic powers competing every year. And I also love the intersectionality about it, right? Like, these two teams aren't located in the same region. So you kind of have like a Midwest versus West Coast rivalry. And part of the thing, or one of the things that has made college football great, I would say in the past, less so now, ever since the wave of conference realignment kind of ruined the regionality of the sport, I would say it's nice to have this style because, like, Notre Dame is kind of known for their style of play, big offensive lines, running the football, whereas like USC has always had the great quarterback, run and gun, putting up a ton of points on the board. And that aspect of college football has kind of been eradicated with conference realignment, but you still had this rivalry, one of the few things left where you had that regional rivalry between the two. And I do think that a lot of people who grew up loving college football, who've been fans for a long time, like, this is one of those last parts of that aspect of the sport that still exists. And if that were to go away, it's just chipping away at all of the things that so many of us loved about college football. And that's what is so sad about this because, as all these changes have happened throughout the sport, it's never been like one year the sport completely flipped. Now, there have been obviously seminal moments, but it seems like they're just chipping away at the things that so many of us love and cherish about this sport. And this would just be another example of that. Like, if Notre Dame and USC, if that rivalry ends, that's not going to cause college football to crater. There might be a few fans who are like, I'm done with college football, but they were probably on the fence for a while. But it's just one of those things where it's just like, why do you keep doing this? Like, if you keep chipping away, eventually you're going to reach a breaking point. I'm not saying they're close to it yet, but when they take more actions like this, you're just getting closer and closer to a new reality that I don't think a lot of fans are going to like.
Here's the ironic part of this whole thing. Everybody says, well, Notre Dame needs to join a conference. I'm not part of that gang, but Notre Dame wanted to be a part of the Big Ten Conference way back in the day before you and I were even a thought in our father's eyes. Our fathers weren't even alive yet when this thing was going on. And because Michigan and maybe another one or two teams didn't want Notre Dame part of the big conference, they sought out USC. This rivalry doesn't exist if, in my opinion, if Notre Dame had become a member of the Big Ten Conference back in the day. So the fact that it might be ending because USC joined the conference is just really odd to me. And I don't buy the whole thing about travel. It's never been an issue, so I don't know why it's starting now. And especially with the players now being able to earn a nice income. Once you go to the 105-man roster, it's not about player safety anymore. They're earning six-figure salaries as well. For me, there is absolutely zero reason why this rivalry needs to end. And we'll talk about in the next segment, what some solutions might be. But for the life of me, it bothers me that USC is actually leveling down out of conference, while I look at the trend and everybody else is leveling up. Even Notre Dame is kind of stepping away from their traditional, we got 4 or 5 games we can kind of slide in here as long as we got USC. You lose USC, you really got to step it up because we talked about the identity with each program. They're kind of tight at the hip. They're almost Siamese twins with everything that goes on. So it would be interesting to see how that changes.
Yeah, I agree with you. And look, I understand that there are a lot of college football fans who look at Notre Dame's independence and they don't get it. They think it's unfair. They think they have a superiority complex. And I actually understand why people feel that way. I'm glad you brought up the fact that Notre Dame did try to join the Big Ten back in the 20s, but Fielding Yost at Michigan did not want Notre Dame to join. I think there were multiple reasons at play. Part of it was on-field results, and I think part of it had to do with the religious affiliation that the University of Notre Dame has. But it's funny how they've kind of kept like a 100-year-long grudge. But the thing that I don't really understand is that, these schools, they join a conference, right? And then they complain about all the things about being in that conference, right? Like USC doesn't love their travel schedule, how they have to go to, last year was like Maryland, this year they got to go to Purdue and West Lafayette, and they're kind of beholden to what their conference commissioner wants. And Notre Dame is like, well, we don't want to do that. We're just going to kind of do our own thing and we can make it work. And yet so many people despise that. And I don't know why that is. And like you and I have been talking about how so many of the great traditions of the sport have been slowly eroding away. Well, Notre Dame is standing their ground and saying, well, we want to keep one of the traditions that has made the school unique and that is sort of part of the fabric and identity of the football program. And now everyone seems to be mad at that. And that's the stuff that I don't really understand, where so many college football fans say they love tradition, they embrace it, and then Notre Dame's like, all right, we want to act on that as well and embrace our traditions, and then people get upset by it. So that's the thing that I don't understand. These two teams have played nearly 100 times. Notre Dame has been independent for every single one of them. It has never been a problem until USC decided to join the Big Ten. And one thing that I wanted to ask you is, I agree that the first time where I even considered the fact that this rivalry might end was when Lincoln Riley sort of brought it up at Big Ten Media Days last year. And it does seem like he has a lot of say in this rivalry. And I don't really understand that, because this rivalry existed long before he became the coach of USC. And it's going to exist, hopefully, or it should exist well after he's at USC. And I would say, I don't think he should have much of a say in this, and I don't think Marcus Freeman should have any say. Like, they could provide some input. It's appreciated, but this goes well beyond any two individuals. I think it should be entirely up to the AD and the university president. So I'm interested to hear what you think about Lincoln Riley's role in this, because I do think that he's kind of the one, maybe he's not leading the train, but he's certainly not, he's certainly an advocate, I think, for this to go away.
Yeah, I think when Lincoln Riley took the job at USC, he knows what the opportunity is. I mean, USC has some built-in natural resources that nobody else in the country has. And I think he thought it was going to be a little bit easier to turn the program around. He then found out, whoa, USC was like dragging their heels with the infrastructure part of the thing. So he's had, since the first year, 2022, with Caleb Williams, the Heisman Trophy, things haven't gone exactly according to plan, so to speak. And I think he's trying to find that balance where, how can we take that next step so the heat isn't on me, so to speak. And sometimes it's like, well, we've got all these tough 9 games in the conference. Why do we need to play another extra hard game? My answer to that is, it was never an issue back in the day when it was the Pac-8, Pac-10, whatever, Pac-12. USC always had a strong out-of-conference schedule. So I'm not sure why it has to change now when everybody says, well, you got to make the playoffs. We know USC have a chance to make the playoffs once they go to the 16-team tournament. They'll have a better chance to go to the playoffs, because if the bar is now set at, you just got to be your 4th best team in your conference and you're in, that's a pretty low bar to set when you're a USC. And I think, to your question, why does Notre Dame get so much blowback? It's because rules are set up for the conferences, and then here's your special Notre Dame rule, so they're included because they're independent. It's an optics thing. So just to kind of give you where, from someone who's not wearing blue and gold lenses, so to speak, that's where it comes from. In other words, I try and tell people, look, Notre Dame's not in the conference. They can go undefeated, but they still can't get higher than a 5 seed. I don't know how that's going to change with the new playoff structure, but that
did just change, yeah.
That was the difference. They could never be higher than a 5 seed, no matter how well they did. And that's what happened, I think, last year. Now that if they have to join a conference, how does that change? I don't know. I don't think it should affect USC at all, because, again, if you are the 4th best team in your conference, you can go 0 for whatever out of conference. It's not going to affect you. So, again, let's talk about some solutions in the next segment. First, we got to do this. So, Monarch Money. You ever look in your account every now and then and say, where did all my money go? You're probably traveling. You're probably buying a ticket for USC Notre Dame. You're just spending money without looking. Well, that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's like having your own personal chief financial officer. It's giving you full visibility, total control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, all of your investments, all of your spending. You do it all in one place. So you can start managing your money, start building some wealth. And the best part about this, you don't need multiple apps to make this happen. You're going to love the all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple different applications, Monarch Money lets you do it all right here. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for half off your first year. All right, Tyler. So let's see if we can help USC and Notre Dame get this figured out. It doesn't seem like it would be a really big challenging issue. USC has offered a 1-year extension. They want to see how the future of the playoff format is going to be set up. Is it going to be 16 teams? Is it going to be 14? Is it going to be 12? What's it going to be? I think we all agree they're moving to 16 teams. So USC floated let's extend it 1 more year. Notre Dame, you come out to LA in 2026, and then we'll see if we can go long-term after that. One of the conditions that USC would like to see in a long-term deal, at least being floated around out there, is moving the game from middle of October, when USC goes out there on the odd number years, to the front of the season. Would Notre Dame fans be open to coming to LA in September?
I would say if it's a decision between that or the rivalry goes away entirely, I think they would make it work. The one thing that I've seen thrown around, I believe Pat Forty had it in his initial report, is this idea of playing neutral site games between Notre Dame and USC. I could not be more against that. I hate that idea. It's like, these are two of the most storied programs. They have two iconic venues. They should never play at, an NFL stadium in a very corporate, that should never happen. And I really would advocate against that. As for playing it earlier in the season, I think that's a little bit tricky because Notre Dame already has some primetime premier games to lead off their season looking down the road. Like you look at next year, Notre Dame is going to play Wisconsin week 1 in Lambeau Field. And then in 2028, they start playing a home and home with Texas. And they also have Alabama 2029. All of these games were scheduled to happen at the very beginning of September because Notre Dame kind of thought you get that big out-of-conference game at the beginning of the year, thinking that they'd be able to play USC at home in the middle of October and then on the road at the end of the year. So I think that is trickier than some people think. I know that there are some USC fans who see that proposal. They're like, oh, well, USC has an offer. Why doesn't Notre Dame take it? It's like, well, because we exist in this world where college football teams have to schedule games a decade in advance, which has never really made that much sense to me. It's a little bit harder to now schedule games in the short term that would significantly change the schedule on such short notice. So that would be tricky. Again, if it's a decision between that or nothing, I would take it. But I do think the logistics of that are harder than some people might recognize.
I like the neutral site game in California, only because I know why Notre Dame wants it at the end of the year. It's their recruiting season. The coaching staff stays over. They hit up the schools, yada, yada, yada.
And they get out of South Bend for a weekend. They get some warm weather, some much needed warm weather.
Well, trust me, you come to LA in September, you're going to get that much needed warm weather. USC fans don't even like playing games in the Coliseum in the first couple of weeks. It's an oven. It's hot. You live in LA. So I guess that's one solution. I know back in the day, USC Notre Dame used to end their season either in LA or in South Bend. USC, you know what? It's a little cold in South Bend the end of November. Let's move it to mid-October. So, like you, I'm the same way. If it means saving the rivalry, we have to be able to figure out if it's going to be. It doesn't have to always be week 1. It could be week 1, week 2, or week 3, or week 0. But if that's going to be the most viable solution, I'm just wondering: is Notre Dame going to be open to that? As your athletic director, Bavakwa, said, we want this long term. We want to play this until we die. I do too. But is he willing to make that kind of compromise just to keep the rivalry going?
I think there are other factors involved. Like he would have to kind of figure out what's going on with the future of the Alabama and the Texas series, because I think those games are scheduled starting in 2029. The Texas game is actually scheduled for 2028 on September 9th. So maybe they would have to move those games around. But also, there's a question of is Notre Dame even going to play Texas, or are they going to play Alabama? Because right now, SEC has an 8-game schedule. There's been talks about moving that to 9-game. They've been pretty reluctant to make that change yet. But I think that if they do decide to go to a 9-game conference schedule, odds are Texas or Bama, one of them is going to drop that game against Notre Dame, maybe both, or maybe they want to keep it. I don't know. But I think that those games on the schedule today even though they're scheduled now, like they might not end up happening because there's going to be more movements, more decisions being made for college football. If that were to happen, that makes it a lot easier for Notre Dame to schedule USC at the beginning of the year. So I think when we're thinking about solutions here, I don't think a one-year deal year over year is realistic. And I don't think anyone would want that. Like at your job, would you want a one-year deal like that? It just prevents you from making long-term plans. Even your short-term feels weird. And I don't think like any coach would accept a one-year deal. So that's not realistic. If it's just for the 2026 season, if it's just to say, hey, we are going to figure out a long-term deal, just give us one more year to figure that out, I'm happy with that. But if the plan is to just do a year-to-year contract, I don't think that's feasible for either program because part of it has to do with the fact that people schedule so far out in advance. So I would say I would be happy with a one-year like plan just so that Notre Dame has a game against USC scheduled for 2026 with the idea that now they have one more year to schedule a long-term plan. And I feel like by 2026, when we're having the same conversation next year at this time, I would imagine that the 16-team college football playoff format will be finalized. We'll know about the automatic bids, and hopefully, there will not be more expansion talks after that. Hopefully, we can just see how that playoff format feels for a couple of years, and we're not just doing this every other year. And I think by that point, then you can actually figure out a long-term deal that makes sense for both parties.
Should an overly aggressive or competitive schedule be a factor in this role? In other words, I've heard people say, why should USC have to play Michigan 1 week in conference and then fly and go play Notre Dame the week after? Again, if the big conference in the SEC do that, one game crossover every year, so you've got 9 conference games in the big, plus an SEC team and Notre Dame. If the out-of-conference games aren't going to affect your chance to get an automatic berth, the only thing you're really concerned about is seeding when the playoff comes out. So again, do Notre Dame fans look at it the same way and say, you know what, we don't want to play, physical teams back to back to back to back? Is that coming up? Because USC fans seem to think it's not fair to them because Notre Dame, again, gets to pick their schedule.
If and when they go to the automatic bids, then it shouldn't matter for USC. To your point, like all they have to do is win their games in conference. And yeah, it's a little bit tougher game for sure. Playing Notre Dame, hopefully they're able to continue this momentum where they have been a tough game for a long time. But I would say like once those automatic bids are solidified, then like it actually hurts Notre Dame more because at that point they're going to have to fight for, I think right now they're talking about 3 at-large bids. Maybe that number goes up. And all of a sudden, every loss counts more for Notre Dame because they don't have a chance to get that automatic bid. So in that case, which I think is going to happen, it makes it much harder for Notre Dame than it does for USC because they have to just worry about their 9 games against their conference opponents, and then they get to keep the rivalry alive. And then we as college football fans get to enjoy one more marquee matchup that features a traditional rivalry. So if and when that happens, I think it benefits USC way more than Notre Dame, which is why I've been a little bit surprised to see so much reluctance on the USC side to sign this deal because it's like, you kind of know what's going to happen, which is why I'm more open to the one-year deal to then set up the long-term deal once you kind of know everything else.
I think the reluctance is people aren't convinced that the playoff football committee is going to start using strength of schedule the way it's supposed to be used. So, you look at last year, you had a team like, let's be honest, Notre Dame's schedule last year, it wasn't really.
Yeah, it was bad. Last year was bad.
You don't beat USC, you're not going to the playoffs. Indiana, same thing. They had a really Charmin soft schedule. They got exposed in the playoffs. So I think that's where the reluctance comes in, at least from USC fans. They want an assurance that, yeah, you play a tough schedule, you're going to get credit for losing, against Notre Dame as opposed to, beating Mercer, that type of stuff. That the way it's applied now, this certain SEC teams. So I think that's really it's the nuance behind everything that's kind of getting in the way or clouding USC fans' vision. But yeah, you and I, we agree. Let's get this thing extended one more year. Let's get it figured out. Make sure everybody gets a compromise. Because if no one's happy, but you get something done, it's a good deal, right? That's what a deal is all about. Nobody's happy, but you sign the deal.
Exactly.
All right. We got one more segment to go. We've been talking about, the USC Notre Dame rivalries. It's kind of part of the fabric of college football. let's talk about some of the best that we've seen over the years. One more segment. So Tyler, you've been around this earth long enough to see some good USC Notre Dame games. I've been around a couple years longer than you. I wasn't at the Coliseum for 1974, but that is considered one of the greatest games in USC history, particularly in the USC Notre Dame rivalry. For me, like I said, I lived through a 13-year winless streak. I dropped to my knees and cried like a baby when Mark Pisano knocked down the Ron Powell's pass in overtime. It was like, finally, it was over. That's how much this rivalry means to the USC fans. And then, obviously, the Bush push was fantastic. What are some of your favorite memories of this rivalry?
So, one sticks out. 2017 Notre Dame USC. That was my senior year when I was a student at Notre Dame, and USC came in. They were favored, I believe, in that game. It was a ranked matchup. I don't think either team was in the top 10, but they were kind of around that 15 range. And Notre Dame just dominated that game. It was like 49-14. And it was a very rare 75-degree day in South Bend in late October. So it just felt like this perfect day. Notre Dame gets a win. And like, even when Notre Dame had beaten USC in the past, they had never blown them out, at least not in my lifetime. So it was basically just like a 3.5 hour long party inside Notre Dame Stadium. So that was a ton of fun. I honestly really enjoyed this past season being there with so much on the line, the back and forth nature of that Notre Dame USC game. And I would think, obviously, the best game in terms of a college football classic was the Bush push, although I think I was 9, and I definitely shed a few tears after that, especially considering I thought Notre Dame had won. You know, the clock runs out, students run on the field, all that stuff. But just thinking about what those USC teams were at that point in time, like they were legit superheroes to me, looking at Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush and even Dwayne Jarrett. Like, they seemed unstoppable. So for Notre Dame, who had been just terrible, honestly, for pretty much my entire life leading up to that point, that game really stands out. And I mean, the fact that we still talk about it, we see the play all these years later, I think tells you just how big of a game that was and why, again, this rivalry is so important to college football.
Yeah, I still remember I was 10 years old, and I was watching that big, giant Trojan horse coming out. All of a sudden, the team's coming out in green jerseys. Joe Montana's doing his thing, and I'm thinking, all right, that's when I really felt it viscerally. This is what this rivalry is all about. And ever since then, you know, it's USC's travel, the white horse, it's the green jerseys, it's everything that this game has represented to college football. Even in the losses, as much as they suck for USC, it's something that USC fans have a saying. There's nothing worse than losing to UCLA, but there's nothing better than beating Notre Dame. That's how we look at the rivalry. There's a respect factor. Even as much as we hate you guys, it's a rivalry built on respect because of the Heisman trophies, the national championships, the NFL All-Pros, the Hall of Famers. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So yeah, for me, I think I encourage everybody, make the pilgrimage to South Bend just once, because it's different than anywhere else. And people just need to feel what college football is supposed to be like. You guys are in the middle of nowhere, but all of a sudden this phoenix kind of rises out of the ashes to a great football program that everybody either loves or hates. There's no in between. And that's what I love about this the most.
Yeah, those losses definitely sting a little bit more. I remember one game in particular, it probably doesn't have the same lore as the other games that we talked about, but looking back to 2009, that was the year where Notre Dame was supposed to finally beat USC. It was like Jimmy Clausen's third year. They were 4-1 at the time. USC was still kind of rolling. They weren't like at their peak yet. I mean, Matt Barkley was the quarterback back then, and it felt like that was the year. Notre Dame put everything into that year being the year where they were finally going to be able to knock off USC. And then I believe you guys were up 34-14 early on in the fourth quarter, and then Jimmy Clausen and Golden Tate led this ferocious comeback that ultimately fell short. They had the ball near the end zone there to try to send the game into overtime. But it's just like, I remember how devastated I was after that game, and then how happy I was in 2023 when Notre Dame was able to get some revenge on Caleb Williams. And at that point, like Notre Dame's season was over. They already lost to Ohio State in pretty embarrassing fashion with the 10 guys in the field, and then they just laid an egg against Louisville. So at that point, they're out of the playoff because they're not in the expanded playoff format yet. And then USC was coming to town undefeated. Caleb Williams had just dominated them. And I remember just being so down on the team going into that game. Then they're able to just, figure out Caleb Williams for one night. They win that game. And I look at the 2023 season totally differently because they were able to have that one night. And if they had beaten another really good team with a good quarterback, it just would not have been nearly as special as beating USC. So I just think that that is why this game is so important. That's why we like it so much. That's why we want it to continue, is because you're not going to be up for the national championship every single year in college football. So when that happens, what is the best thing that can come out of that season? Beating your rival. And USC is Notre Dame's biggest rival. I know USC has UCLA, but you've already pointed out nothing is better than beating Notre Dame. So it's all this stuff should matter. And I feel like hopefully these parties are going to be able to figure it out, because this rivalry means so much to me and you, people on the Notre Dame and USC side. I've never seen so many Notre Dame and USC fans agree on anything more than, hey, we should keep playing this game.
Yeah, trust me. I think everybody wants this thing to continue. It's, college football is tribal as it is. And sometimes you need to be able to cross over and say, you know what, let's look at it from their point of view. You look at it from their point of view, just to have a common understanding. And I think they're going to get this done. I'm fingers crossed, because I would, like I said, I'd hate to see it go away. For me, I'll never forget my first time going to South Bend. It was a loss. It was Pete Carroll's first year. They were going into halftime with a nice lead, but Pete got a little cocky going into halftime, tried that fake punt, and I'll never forget this, Tyler. I was having a great time up in the stands, and I turned around, and two old ladies, had to have been in their 80s. All of a sudden, they're giving me the one-finger salute, both of them.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, this is cool. Not the last laugh at the end of the day, obviously, but I guess last question I want to ask you about this. What is Notre Dame's perspective on USC coming in and, taking Chad Bowden away?
At the time, I think a lot of people were really upset, but I think it's kind of added another element to this rivalry, because Chad is he's a character, I think is the best way to put it, right? He likes to ruffle some feathers. He was not afraid to ruffle some feathers when he was at Notre Dame. He would do it with the admissions department and all that stuff. So when he left, I think there was a little bit of shock. And then once you kind of learn more about the situation, the offer that he was given by USC was kind of a no-brainer at that point that he should take the job. But it's actually added more intrigue to the rivalry, because USC's done those things when Trent Mosley committed, they posted that video on Twitter where it's build your own legacy at USC, Mosley being a Notre Dame legacy, and all the clips are USC's touchdowns on Notre Dame. That certainly riled up some Notre Dame fans, but I kind of loved it from the aspect of this is what makes the rivalry great. We don't have much to talk about. We're in the middle of the offseason. So I think that it has just kind of added more gasoline to the fire. I can't wait for the game this year. I was already excited before all this stuff happened. I have tickets to go, so I can't wait. And I think that, at first it was really disappointing to see Chad go, but now he's the perfect enemy in a way, a traitor and all that stuff. I don't necessarily share that sentiment, but I think it just made it even better.
Oh, I agree. For me, I always use the line, there's a fine line between arrogance and competence, and I tend to walk that line like a drunk sailor on a Saturday. It's hard to tell when someone's being arrogant and when someone's being competent. Chad comes across that way a lot of times when he talks, and I love it. I appreciate it. So if he can help USC build their program the way he helped Notre Dame build their program back up, that's just going to be best for everybody. And it's going to make these USC Notre Dame games in the future, hopefully, knocking on wood, that much better. Because, again, I remember 1988 when USC was number 2, Notre Dame was number 1. I remember 1996, Lou Holtz's final game as Notre Dame's head coach, and he had to leave as a loser. That's the type of stuff that makes this rivalry so special. So I'm glad we did this, Tyler. It's the first time we've done it.
Absolutely.
You're going to be in South Bend. I'll be in South Bend. Let's make sure we get together. Let's talk more. See, where we're at. Especially during the summer. if things takes a turn for the worse, we'll have to revisit this subject. So let everybody know where they can find you, and if they want to watch you talk about Notre Dame.
Yeah, if you're looking to get more riled up about this rivalry and you're a USC fan, you can check me out at Locked On Irish. Still doing it daily here during the off season. My name is Tyler Wojciak. You can follow me on Twitter at Tyler WOJCIAK. And I talked a lot about the rivalry this week. I'd like to hear more from the USC fans, kind of how they feel, because I do think that we're actually a lot more alike than we are different in this very rare situation. So yeah, check me out. And we're going to be talking about this a lot more. And I'd love to do something leading up to the game in October.
Absolutely. And Notre Dame fans, hey, I don't bite. I'm just brutally honest. So if you want to come over, hang out, I'll educate you on USC as well. So when I'm not here at Locked On USC, you can always find me over there at wersc.com, part of the On3 network. So when I'm not talking, I'm writing. So, all right, everyone. Tyler, again, thank you so much. I appreciate you doing this.
Of course.
We'll do it again. And until that next episode, everyone, you know what to do.